is at county per capita. Typically, the libraries in the county use. I'll get the county per capita. That was, I believe, $6.90 per person, and it will be reduced to $5.87 if I have the figure correct.
So for the Carpinteria branch, how much money does it actually amount to in terms of dollars?
I believe it's $18,000 is
Okay.
the reduction.
Sorry, I didn't, you may have said that, but I didn't write it
Okay.
down. I just wanted to get
And
that.
the
right.
only other funding sources are the volunteer organizations such as the Friends who do a great job, and then in any cities that are accompanying with each of the facilities.
Okay. Thank you so much. And we are very aware of your problem, and I do appreciate you coming tonight.
Through the mayor,
Thank you.
just one quick question. Is it possible to have a volunteer supervisor?
A volunteer supervisor, no, you couldn't. We use a lot of volunteers at the library. That's always a question that comes up, and the libraries would not be able to operate the way they do without the number of volunteers. You'll rarely go in the branch without finding at least one volunteer at the branch, and sometimes you might find 2 or 3 at a time volunteering, and they do a lot of work there.
Through the chair. I'm hoping that we can brainstorm to get back a lot of these services, between our city, and also, again, encouraging the funds to be spent in Carpinteria, selling properties, all those things we need to do. But we do have you in mind. And I believe for our community, the library is of utmost importance. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Questions for staff on this?
No, I don't have any questions.
What the heck is this?
Ready to make a speech? if you want me to.
Well, you're gonna make a speech?
Speech time?
Yeah, you can make a speech. Have a speech.
I mean, I don't want to undermine the integrity of this process. I mean, are we
No,
continuing
This
other
is,
things?
there aren't any questions. I have no questions. Like I say, I've been with the budget subcommittee. We've been combing over this thing for months, trying to find ways and means, and just from my perspective, ways and means. Thank you. One thing that, and I did make that comment earlier, voluntary furloughs, yes, we are looking at that, and we are allowing those in a lot of instances. The other thing is, I want folks to know that, I mean, we're in a very down time right now, but we're starting to see the horizon. And again, at our mid-year, this is something we can look at. Nobody has a crystal ball. If I could predict it, I would say, yes, we're going to be able to refund this. But I am optimistic, and I hope we can go back to full funding. That's the one thing about being on this council this long. I've seen it, the ups and downs. And every time we've gone into the trough, everybody's tightened their belt, everybody's taken the hit. We have terrific services here that are provided for our community. And I can just give you my personal guarantee that at the mid-year, we're going to relook at all this and hopefully be able to restore the funding that we're going to be shortchanged right now on. That's my promise. So, sorry, I didn't mean to steal your, go ahead.
No, I appreciate that reiteration of what has transpired up to now. I'm going to go on record, and again, I don't say this, with any intention to offend my colleagues here. I love and adore all of you. I think you all do a wonderful job serving the people, the good people of this community. But I just have to go on record objecting to this process. I just don't think we give this budget nearly enough analysis and scrutiny as a council. Now, I'm not suggesting that the budget committee doesn't do a terrific job of dissecting it, but unless I've been someplace else, I do not recall over the last several months having the sort of in detail analysis from A to Z on the bottom line of every single departmental budget here. It seems to me that this is almost a fait accompli tonight, that this budget has been put together as a matter of sort of as if it were handed down from Mount Sinai. And it seems to me that these are really policy questions. These are policy questions. And I'll just go on record, for example, and say that I'm absolutely adamantly against cutting any of the community service budgets. And let me tell you why. The last point that you want to cut community service is when you're cutting back your law enforcement. I mean, we are in effect dismantling our law enforcement capability in this community as a result of the votes that have transpired over the last couple of months. It seems to me this is the time when we should be investing in CARP Cares, investing in the Rape Crisis Center, investing in our library. We need to be giving our kids a positive alternative. And instead, we're cutting, and then we're dismantling our law enforcement and our public safety. Seems to me that is not a good strategy. Indeed, I would suggest that that is penny wise and pound foolish. Now, I have pointed out many times, and I appreciate my colleagues' comments with respect to sacred cows, but it seems to me that the only sacred cow in Carpinteria today seems to be the strategic reserve. It's the one thing we don't seem to want to touch. Let me just, as a parenthetical point here, let me ask John a question. You said earlier that with respect to the $1 million reserve for parks, that money basically is not, the principal is not used, the interest is then used to fund park programs. But then I think I also heard you say that money has not been used for any park programs, but it may be used for park programs in the future. Is that a fair characterization of what you said?
Yes, the interest that's been earned on that $1 billion, it has been used before, but it never goes below the $1 million amount. And there's now about 150,000
Okay.
in excess of the $1 million.
Okay,
yes.
so there's $150,000 of interest as a result of that $1 million sinking fund that has not been allocated. The council, as far as I understand, has not used that money for any particular thing. And it seems clear to me that the $1 million is a policy matter, that the council, I think even before my time on the council, established that $1 million as a matter of policy. I would just suggest, and if we had, if there were more opportunities to unpack these issues as a strategic effort to really itemize and establish a sensible equilibrium between expenses and revenue, we could have these conversations. Why not, for example, as a matter of policy, since these are difficult times, and since I would suggest perhaps the biggest priority in the community isn't park programs right now when we're cutting back our law enforcement and when we're cutting back money to libraries and rape crisis centers, maybe a future park program isn't at the top of the list. Why not, as a matter of policy, allow the allocation of that $150,000 to our community service budget? Why not allow that $150,000 to be used to mitigate some of the proposed reductions in our sheriff's contract? Indeed, why not establish a similar $1 million sinking fund and use that in the future to offset some of the increases in our law enforcement contract? So the point I'm making is it seems to me that we have some pretty big issues to tackle here. We're dealing with a $14 million budget, a $1 million deficit. We're discussing the dismantling of our public safety infrastructure, and we're going to do it all in what, 45 minutes? An hour and a half? I mean, that's just not acceptable to me. I think these issues are way too important. I think they need way more analysis and scrutiny, and I think that, I think the community deserves that. I'm very, very concerned, as I've said, about what we're doing with our law enforcement. I think that's a mistake. I think we have the money. The council has voted on that. I voted on that. The record is what it is. I would hope, though, going into tonight's hearing, that my council would at least be receptive to the idea that while we're cutting back law enforcement, while we're cutting back our community resource officer, while we're decimating our ability to investigate crimes, we've gotten rid of one of our 2 detectives. While these things are happening, maybe it's not the right time to be defunding some of the positive programs that will allow us to reestablish some sense of quality of life in this community. I think that quality of life and public safety are inextricably linked. We're defunding our public safety and defunding our community service programs. I think that's just an absolute mistake. And so that's the beginning part of my speech. and I'll shut up, and I'm eager to hear some response.
Well, number one, that's an extreme view. We aren't dismantling law enforcement in the community, folks, just to let you know. But I did notice a change down the street. Instead of 5 cars parked in front of a local restaurant for breakfast, there were 4. So that's one thing. But that being said, we are not shortchanging this community as far as law enforcement. The officer that was going to the schools, we've already heard the state is defunding that. We never had that before. The state funded that officer. So that's why that position is going away. The $1 million in the reserve we did put back in I believe it was 97, 98, I can't remember when we did that. And we have used those funds, interest. If you look at all the kids, the hundreds of kids that play baseball, soccer, the hundreds of kids that play soccer, those fields are subsidized. They do not pay the rates that you go to any other city around us, they'd be paying at least 3 times the amount. But our city is subsidizing that through that system. We are about 15 years beyond the sprinkling system that was put in 35 years ago at El Carroll Park. We're lucky to even have grass there. That, I was told, is going to cost somewhere in the tune of about $250,000 to tear up and redo that park. When you have avenues for kids to play, athletics is a great system. The Boys and Girls Club do a phenomenal job with that. Girls Inc., phenomenal job. You can take numbers like this, but it actually is stretched out throughout the community and paid for in other ways. And that was part of the subsidy. And we did set that up for that reason in the downtimes. It costs a lot of money to maintain those parks. And just because you're looking at a deficit in our park maintenance fund of $150,000 this year, that's not what that money was set aside to do. We need to have fences replaced. We need to have backstops replaced. That costs a lot of money, but you can't do it like that. You have to save it over time. Like a lot of these funds, we save over time. I understand your frustration with the sheriff's contract. We are not putting this community in jeopardy, in my opinion. I think what we've done across the board is tightened our belts. And I volunteer more hours now than I ever have. And I think everybody in the community can step up and do the same. It's not just about dollars, it's also about time.